Hello and welcome to GuyLogic. My name is Temco and this is Stellaris, where we'll be taking a look at the Leviathan DLC story pack as well as the 1.3 patch, a bit of a look back at the game. So this is a review of the content DLC as well as a revisiting of the original title with its 1.3 patch. We're not going to be looking at options or settings or anything of the sort. That hasn't really changed at all since release, and neither has the performance in any great degree. The game is still very heavy when you have a large battle or a large number of assets on screen, and that isn't likely to change unless hardware gets better, so it seems. Other than that, the game has had two major patches prior to my revisiting, so if you are interested in what those patches brought, I suggest you take a look at the Paradox Plaza forums, which is the developers sort of forums, and they have a large number of posts about explaining things that these patches have changed. Also, like no, there is a ton of modding for Stellaris, some of it very extensive, and all of those will be broken with 1.3. That means all your favorite mods will need to be upgraded or reinstalled. As far as I can tell, none of the mods currently I use work in 1.3, which is a bit of a shame. But 1.3 also breaks save files, so if you are not inclined to skip ahead on your game or start a new one, I do suggest waiting on updating the patch if you can at all, or playing on a previous version if that becomes available through Steam. But for all your new games, you're gonna have to start them with 1.3 and your old save files will be unplayable. A bit of a shame, but I do understand it because 1.3 is a massive patch. But before we dive into 1.3, I first want to touch on the Leviathan story pack. Now this is a content DLC that is standalone that you can buy alongside the game, and it will add a little bit of content to the game. Now the main things that developers are touting as being added are these Leviathans, which are powerful guardians that spawn in the world and you can find and fight, and they guard treasures and secrets and stuff like that. They also have a pseudo trading system included where certain minor aspects are added to the game. Now Stellaris still doesn't have a full-fledged trading or economy system that you would expect from a actual trading game, but it does have this pseudo trading where you can exchange minerals for energy for minerals, and a few other things, which is a pretty nice addition, but not game changing, and that is really the tone of voice I want to use for Leviathan. Things they have added with Leviathan: a couple of new portraits for races, some new music from Andreas Waldertoft, I'm sorry I'm mispronouncing your name, and stuff like that, but really nothing great. Yes, now they have a War in Heaven option where two awakened fallen empires can give a galaxy-wide war, sort of a end-game galactic warfare, which is pretty cool, but the chance of encountering that in any given game is pretty slim, so that is a bit of a shame. Other than that though, 1.3 brings a lot of changes with it. So while you might not want to get the Leviathan story pack, depending on your preferences and budget, the 1.3 editions that you'll get for free are pretty extensive and definitely worth your attention and revisiting this title since its 1.0 inception. Now at 1.0, when the game released, and you can check out our full review by pressing the little white bubble in the top right, the game was pretty good, but it did have some serious flaws deeper in the game, especially when you went to the later stages of the cycle, mid to late game, as well as large-scale combat. There were some balancing issues there were some lulls in the game pacing, and there were some issues with ship types and compositions, that basically smaller ships became obsolete quite fast. So developers have tried to improve upon this during the first two major patches. 1.1 and 1.2 made changes to the way zones work, made changes to the way AI works, and quite a few other things to improve overall gameplay from both a difficulty perspective as well as a ease of access perspective, so that all the information you might want is readily available on screen. And with 1.3, they decided to redo several core systems, primarily the way combat and ship upgrading works, as well as certain new ways that they introduced to fallen empires and things like that. Now the major change here is the addition of different types of slots for ships that are only specific to a specific ship type. So you may have hangars that are specific to certain levels of ships. You can have extra large slots that are only for battleships. You will have afterburners. You will have ship type specific thrusters or slots that are only available for that type of hull. And this means that ships now differentiate between each other quite effectively. Also, various upgrades now are not natural scaling, which means that unlike previously, if you got a shield upgrade, it would give 5 shield, and it had a large one, it would give 10 shield. Now that depends on the type of ship you're adding it to, which again makes it impossible to rebalance, meaning that corvettes, the very small ships, will benefit from extra hull and extra shielding much more than very large battleships based on the same module, which is really good, which means that smaller ships have a very definite use now later down the line. They've made it more of a rock, paper, scissors environment in terms of corvettes being very good against cruisers and so on and so forth, and all of these ships interacting with one another, as opposed to a straight up, this is the way you go forward, this is what was the best build possible, build your ship with tons of the ship and you win. It requires a little bit more thinking, a little bit more effect, and a little bit more knowledge on what your opponent has in single player, and obviously much more so in multiplayer. A very good change in addition to the game. It doesn't change the actual nature of combat though, which is still, I think, the weakest part of Stellaris. Yes, the new technical and technological aspect of shipbuilding, as well as the new composition aspect to shipbuilding with 1.3 is pretty good, but keeping in mind that it still means that you'll be sending a fleet of ships against another fleet of ships, and at the end of the day, you'll be looking at 2 numbers, yours and theirs, and see which one drops fastest. That hasn't really changed, and the only thing that's changed is how well you build the composition of ships to go into that battle. So yes, a good direction, but still not the in-depth or more controlled combat system I personally would have liked to see. As for strategic resources, is a very cool aspect to the game. Previously, strategic resources were bland and both too rare and not rare enough. You could have 3 or 4 of a specific resource and you would have to use them on a specific building, and it was kind of annoying and not worth it most of the time to go after them. Now, strategic resources come in 2 segments: planetary bound resources, such as alien pets, as well as global resources that provide a permanent buff as long as you have control over that resource. Which means that if you have a research station in orbit over a planet that has a global type of strategic resource, you will get a global bonus. This could be lowered cost on terraforming different planets. This could be an increase in your food production or your mineral production, or lowering of your ship upkeep, anything else you might imagine. These bonuses are global, which means obviously that you don't need multiple of these rare resources, which also means that you can trade away these rare resources much more efficiently to other empires. Pretty good in that regard. And it also means that the developers were able to make these rare resources actually rare and be a more sought out and sought after commodity, where controlling a rare resource actually means something, actually provides strategy. Pretty good. Then you have the planet bound variant that you have to build a specific building on to generate that resource's special bonus. A beryllium power plant can only be built on a tile with, you guessed it, beryllium. Pretty good overall, and these resources are much more common and can be found on many planets. A third change I feel is very interesting is the way terraforming has been altered. Previously, terraforming was quite cumbersome, that you had to build a terraform station above a planet, and then you had to go cycle through various stages of terraforming a planet to get to the planet type you desired, and that was a pretty annoying aspect. This also boiled down to the way planets worked. You had sort of a radial dial going from the best planet for your race, and then a little bit worse, very bad, a little bit better, somewhat good. You had this little cycle around you. Right now, what they've done is they've segmented planets in 3 segments. And these 3 segments basically mean these planets are habitable for your race, more or less. And they also fall in the segment where you can easily terraform a planet to a different type. So now if I want a tropical planet and I see a ice world, I can instantly terraform it to a tropical planet instead of going through the same cycle several times. Yes, it costs more money, but it's one click instead of several cycles of waiting to terraform into this new planet I can actually use, which is a nice little quality of life change. With the addition of a slider for habitable worlds in the game setup options, this also introduced the option of play a very low setting where worlds are rare or very abundant, meaning you can expand fast or rarely expand at all, increasing or decreasing the overall difficulty for yourself and other players. Overall, these are the major changes in Stellaris 1.3, and the patch notes are very large. There's changes to the way AI works for NPC minions. There's a way for creatures and space creatures, how they work. There's been changes to battleships and cruisers. There's been changes to the way diplomacy works in certain ways, such as the way federations and alliances work. There's new technologies. There's new aspects to frontier hospitals, cannons, and so on and so forth. The patch notes are pretty damn big, and the changes to the game are also pretty big. But I feel these major changes are the ones that really do set the tone for the expansion. Reworking combat, streamlining resources, streamlining a bit of the diplomacy aspect, and looking at making every aspect of the game feel meaningful. The same goes for things like auto-explore. Early on in the game, you don't really have a lot to do. You'll be doing mostly waiting, and then putting a ship on exploration, manually doing those actions, is actually gameplay you want to do. But later down the line, when you have 2 or 3 sectors and you're exploring a 1,000-star galaxy, sending a ship to explore really isn't all that interesting when you have 50 other things to do. So they've introduced a technology that will allow you to set auto-explore on down the line, which is, I feel, a nice compromise between having auto-explore from the start and being bored out of your skull in the early game versus not having it at all and being tedious and annoying in the mid to late game. Pretty damn good. Now, the only other major change I want to discuss in this revisiting is the way Fallen Empires have changed, which actually means that now playing with Fallen Empires is actually quite interesting. Because right now, Fallen Empires have changes that means they no longer have negative modifiers, but only positive ones. And they also have the ability to upgrade themselves to awakened Fallen Empires, which triggers a condition or sort of endgame state, where they will expand or explore or exploit or exterminate depending on the type of Fallen Empire they are. And if you have multiple of these awakening and you have the Leviathan DLC pack, then you can trigger a War of the Heavens, which also triggers multiple other things in the game. Again, this is a pretty rare event because awakening a Fallen Empire still takes quite a bit of effort. And even trying to awaken them, I've only been able to do so twice and then got slaughtered, obviously. So these are obviously very late game changes that impact very late game large galaxy players and rounds and turns, which is really cool if you're down 20-30 hours. If you are in a game and you're just starting up, the same issues still apply to Stellaris, with the limitations of certain technologies and the limitations of trading and diplomacy do hinder your early development. And if you're playing in a large galaxy, it still becomes quite a cluster of things you have to look for and look at, and sectors still provide quite a bit of headache to manage and control based on the fact that even now, even with the changes in 1.1, 1.2, and even now in 1.3, there are still issues with the way the AI handles sectors and the way it deals with managing them in your stead. The sector idea is still very good because it takes away a lot of micromanagement, which isn't fun from you, and provides you a lot of overall top-level control, but it does make some very dumb decisions that you can't override, which is a bit of a shame still. So, the Leviathan DLC pack, while in my opinion is not great value, it does add certain things to the game that are quite interesting, and it might be worth your effort to pick up if you already are committed to Stellaris and have had quite a few hours in it. It does provide a little twist and a little bit extra to the game. Nothing spectacular, but whether or not it's worth the money is your decision. 1.3 though is a tremendously large patch that provides a lot of value for all players, and obviously it's a free patch, everybody's going to get it. So if you have Stellaris, I do suggest checking it back out again with the 1.3 patch because it has done tremendous amounts of changes, even in previous patches, but especially now to ship building, ship combat, growth, interaction, every aspect of the game. I do also suggest you check out the patch notes on the Paradox forums. I'll link them in the description below for your viewing pleasure so you can get a little bit of a look at what is changed. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked what you saw, press the like button below. If you didn't like this video, well, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose, and leave a comment. Tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like. We want to hear back from all of you. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below and we will deliver. And until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogic.